A thriller in Atlanta. SEC championship game coming down to this. We're in overtime. Georgia down 19-16. Carson Beck back in the game after an injury to his right arm. A play that just before happened. Gunnar Stockton to the goal line. And then Trevor Etienne, walk me off. The Dogs back on top as they win the SEC championship. 8 overtimes to beat Georgia Tech. They only needed 1 overtime to beat Texas, handing the Longhorns their 2nd loss of the season. It's always tough to beat a team twice. They did that as Georgia beats Texas twice in the same season, joining the Texas A&M team from 1909 as the only teams to defeat Texas twice in a season. Georgia on to the playoff. Texas in the playoff as well. Now we wait seeding, but wow. Drama in Atlanta as Gunnar Stockton takes over and leads them to the victory 22-19 to win the SEC title. This SEC championship game recap is presented by USAA, here with 2-time Super Bowl champ Bryant McFadden and CBS Sports college football writer Richard Johnson. B-Mac, Gunnar Stockton comes in, starts the second half, leads them on a touchdown drive, and then the play right before they score on drives 8 yards. His helmet's knocked off. You want to talk about a guy that's given it all on the line? Gunnar Stockton, what'd you see from that young man?
A player who's tough as beef jerky.
Yes.
My goodness, for a player not expected to play, come into this type of ball game, so much on the line, and just leaves it all out there on the football field. Kudos to Gunnar Stockton. Yes, he had that interception that gave the Longhorns some extra life, but in terms of just effort, being relentless and being overly tough, that's who number 14 is. And the thing about Gunnar for Texas, when Carson Beck was announced that he wasn't returning, they had no film on Gunnar. They had no way to prepare for Gunnar because they didn't know exactly what he would provide for the offense with UGA. And then in comes a guy that clearly is mobile. He loves to run the football, and he has a strong arm. And he just played with an uncanny ability to be able to say, you know what, I've been here before, even though I've never been here before. So you like that when you talk about Gunnar moving forward, because yes, yet and still, if Carson Beck is ready to go, healthy enough to go throughout this playoff stretch, this is his team. But in terms of life after Carson Beck, they may have found their guy.
Richard, I've been calling for Gunnar Stockton since September. You remember that when we were here, you and I, Alabama and Georgia, and all those picks from Carson Beck? We said, hey, how about Gunnar Stockton in the second half? And then Carson Beck had the second half that he had. They lost, but still it was an incredible second half. What did you see from Gunnar Stockton in that moment where Kirby Smart says, hey, you're going in, son, and we're trying to win this game?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you saw that, hey, he's going to use his legs a little bit more than Carson Beck did. They had a lot of QB draws, a lot of zone reads with him and the running back to get him mobile, use his legs. But, guys, we're not touching on the last play of the game. The play after what we just saw when Gunnar Stockton gets knocked out. Carson Beck goes back in the game, and he can't use his right arm. Nope. 75,000 people in the stands, and these 3 gentlemen sitting at the desk know what's about to happen.
Run.
It's that Georgia's going to run the ball, and yet Texas is soft up the middle, and Etienne plunges in the end zone for the game winner here. I cannot believe that Texas was not able to hold up front on this play that you're seeing on your screen right now.
You want to know why? Because of the Georgia offensive line. That's why.
And that Georgia
offensive line
has been maligned this season. It's been changed around. There are shuffled parts. You got a backup right tackle playing left tackle. You've had Tate Ratledge, who's been hurt all season at right guard, and they finally found a 5 combination that works, Hakeem. It's a great point that Georgia offensive line comes up huge in this.
Well, and Trevor Etienne has missed the last 3 games with a rib injury. Yep. I mean, he's out there. He doesn't care what's going on. He's going to go in and try to win them the game. The offensive line is the underrated hero here in this spot when you take a look at what happened down the stretch. For Texas, it was missed opportunities, B-Mac.
Oh, my goodness, man. Listen, when it comes to the Longhorns, they need to look themselves in the mirror, from players to coaches, right? Because you played against a team in terms of being disciplined, that's UGA. In terms of executing and making adjustments, that's UGA, Kirby Smart. Think about this. Midway through the second quarter, the Longhorns' total offense roughly over 140 yards. Georgia had 9 yards. Midway through the second quarter, they had 9 yards. They were only down 6 points. That's not winning football. So if you're a UGA fan, you applauding your team because as bad as you played, as poorly as you played, you were only down 6 points, and then eventually you got things going. And then outside of that, 10 penalties for 94 yards in an SEC championship game. 10 penalties for 94 yards. You guys know how much UGA had? They only had 5 for 49 yards.
Sark would like to say that they weren't getting some holding.
We heard Sark say. He was ranting. He was fired up. But at the end of the day, the referees call it how they see it. You have been undisciplined. You were undisciplined in this game, and you had 3 turnovers. That's losing football. With or without Gunnar Stockton, that's losing football. And guess what? That was their issue. Not to mention the makeable field goals that they missed.
Yes, Texas left points on the field. And it's not just with the field goals that they missed. Think about in the first quarter, you had opportunities where you were moving the ball.
And penalties.
And penalties knock you out. And they create stop situations for Georgia's defense. They help Georgia's defense out. This was a sloppy game on both sides. I want to make that clear. This was not a vintage SEC championship game in my estimation.
You thought it was sloppy?
I did. I thought it was sloppy on both ends. Well, first of all, Gunnar Stockton coming in, and I understand back.
Oh, his injury.
But he throws the interception there at the end to give Texas second life, to allow Texas to tie the game late. I did not think Quinn Ewers played well in this game at all when it came to throwing the ball down the field. Georgia's passing offense before Gunnar Stockton had to come in the game, when Carson Beck was still the quarterback, drops. Their passing offense was not in rhythm, not executing. I thought both offenses in this game struggled to execute throughout the entire game. This was not a vintage SEC championship game. It had an exciting ending here, but I don't think this is one of those classics that you're going to be watching on repeat for years and years to come.
In terms of the sloppiness, let's highlight UGA.
They had 6 sacks.
You talked about the drops, though. They've been doing that all year.
Yeah.
Carson Beck hasn't been efficient all year. That has been their issue for their offense. Inconsistencies in spurts of ball games.
Arian Smith, how many times do we sit up there, B-Mac, and talk about Arian Smith, number 11 on Georgia?
He's been doing that all year. They probably lead college football in drops. I don't know if that's I don't know the number, but when you look at Georgia, that has been their Achilles heel to the passing game. But the thing about Georgia, though, as bad as they look in spurts, they're adjusting. The adjustments from their coaches. And I said this during the halftime break. Kirby Smart is one of the best coaches in terms of getting his team to turn the corner 360 degrees at halftime. That's what we saw a week ago against Georgia Tech. That's what we saw earlier in the year. Even though they lost to Alabama, remember how bad they looked in the first half, and it looked like a different ball club in the second half. And we saw that in this half. So even though there's some concerns when it comes to Carson Beck, he's not looking like Carson Beck of 2023. Their wide receivers, they don't have a guy. They need to go out and buy a wide receiver in the offseason in terms of NIL. But they still find ways to win because teams let them off the hook. You cannot allow that snake to slither through the grass. When you see that snake, chop the head off, because if you don't, it's going to come back and it's going to bite you in the you-know-what. And that's what we saw with Texas today in the SEC championship game.
Well, it was a tale of 2 halves, right? Because Texas had 260 total yards in the first half. They had 129 in the second. Georgia had 54 yards in the first half. They finished with 277. So when you talk about adjustments and some of the play calling for Texas down the stretch, that's where I thought it was sloppy. That's where I go, what are we doing there? Or why are we doing this here? You saw a couple of missed field goals by Burt Auburn. So when you think back at the missed opportunities, sure, but also too, B-Mac, the defense for Georgia is forcing teams to do this. And I know they went to 8 overtimes last week against Georgia Tech. This is what we've seen out of this Georgia team. It's a second-half team.
They have guys that make plays. And that's the thing about Kirby. I remember when I was at Florida State, my junior campaign, my junior season, Kirby was our coach. And one thing Kirby understood and learned from Coach Andrews, who was our defensive coordinator.
Mickey Andrews.
The great legend Mickey Andrews is, we play my man is better than your man football. So regardless if you know what we're going to do, we believe our guy is better than your guy, and our guy will eventually make a play, but you just have to be patient. He exercised being patient because when you're patient, you're not pressing and you're not trying to force a play to happen. You have to trust that the guy standing to your left and your right is going to do their job, and somebody is going to make a play because our guys, they're better than your guys. And that's what we saw. And outside of that, in terms of the play from the defenders, think about the fake punt call. Think about that.
Yes.
That was the play of the game, in my opinion, Hakeem. When you make that play, because you are basically in minus territory. If you don't get that, if you don't convert that, Texas, they're set up in scoring position. But when you make that play and you convert it, that led to a field goal. That was a defining play for me because the guts to make that play and believing your guys will execute it was a thing of beauty.
And to me, we talk about missed opportunities for Texas. Georgia has a backup punter in the game.
Yep.
You have to be alert. You have to think something like that is coming. Hell, Georgia's done this in SEC championships before. Now, it didn't work. They ran that fake punt with Justin Fields a couple years ago. But they will put the cards on the table and do that in this big spot. And I think Texas, there were two gunners that even Kirk Herbstreit on the broadcast pointed out, backs turned to the play the entire time. Just didn't see it. Weren't aware in that spot that Georgia would pull something like that off. I do have to hand it to Georgia, though. They are not as good as they've been in the last couple years.
Yep.
I think that's fair to say.
I agree.
But against Florida, against Georgia Tech, here tonight,
Texas,
they have found
ways.
a way. They found a way. And that is the heart and the mark of a champion. At the end of the day, that is the mark of a champion, and at least tonight, they're champions. They're SEC champions.
Well, get this. Sacks allowed by Texas this season versus Georgia, 13.
In 2 games.
All others, 15.
Yeah.
7 and 6 in this one here.
No Kelvin Banks tonight.
Right.
You think that plays a part in
the backup did a nice job, though, even without Kelvin Banks.
Yeah, because remember what they did the first game in October. I mean,
and he played in that game.
Yeah, he played in that game. So
Right.
it's just something about the matchup. Sometimes there are bad matchups in sports. You just can't really, make it known why. But it is. And unfortunately for Texas, UGA is a bad matchup. And if you're going to have success against a UGA defense, you better have a quarterback that can run. That's why I think if these teams were to face off again at some point in time in playoff football, you might need to consider Arch Manning being more involved in the passing, in the offense, because look at Haynes King last week. What caused Georgia's defense issue?
Yes.
Running.
Yep.
Right? Either improvise running or quarterback design running plays. Think about Jalen Milroe when he played against UGA. If you're going to have success against UGA, you have to have a quarterback that can actually run when given the opportunity, or he can become a +1 in the running.
Well, they had a chance to win this game. There was 40 seconds left in the game, and they get aided by the pass interference call on Dalen Everett, who had the big interception on the drive before, and then it's incomplete.
All passes.
And then you got no run plays. You're down in the red zone, and we talk about this every week, B-Mac. Coaches, the egos, and you have a chance to win the game, and you're settling for 3 instead of trying to go for 6.
Yeah, it didn't make any sense because the pass interference gave them scoring
Prime
an
opportunity
to score a touchdown. So in my opinion, the entire playbook is still open because you have timeouts at your disposal. You don't need to go ahead and try to get it all in one play. Work your way down, utilize the clock, but also understand you have timeouts. When you look at the aggressive nature, I felt like that was the wrong thing to do because the entire playbook was open. You felt like watching those sequence of plays that they had no timeouts and they needed to score right now. No, be mindful of the situation and don't allow the situation to determine how you call plays. Allow the plays to determine the situation.
The backup quarterback for Georgia comes in, plays the role of hero. Gunnar Stockton had only thrown more than 12 passes in a college game. He completed 12 of 16. He had a huge play to get them inside the goal line, and it's Trevor Etienne who punches it in for Georgia to win the SEC championship.